Recently, my husband signed up for Ko-fi, however you say it, thinking it was a last bastion for creators and artists to promote their creativity of the work and to kind of finagle the selling points, the promoting, everything in one place, a hub, if you will. What we found out in less than 24 hours was that even though we read everything, they took immediate steps to close his account. This is why. When you read regulations on this site, it says that there's some prohibited content, some off-site conduct that they look at, but it's pretty bland. It's kind of like community guidelines here on YouTube. It's very subjective. So things that you do that are completely legal, regulated by the government, that you have to buy licenses for, that is a life skill in many areas that may not be normal in metro areas or to people that live on concrete, you are subjectively different. Therefore, they see you as graphic. So it says it has neutrality on political or religious views and emphasis on content, not policies. But in less than 24 hours, all we saw were policies and knee-jerk reaction practices that did not focus on creators nor focus on common sense, legal parameters, and understanding that art is subjective. And unless there's a criminal offense or a truly nasty side to it, it's subjective, y'all. If you want to read about another creator that had issues with this site, you can go and look at the Sketches of Shay. She has a great video out about the problems she ran into in this website. I'm going to talk about the problems we ran into and why I think these problems show that maybe it's a sounding board for more people to be narrow-minded, even though they think they're being open-minded, and to further police people that they don't understand based on ignorance, rather than what it's supposed to stand for, an open platform. So the big thing is my husband's a trapper and tanner. Many people don't understand the role of hunting and wildlife conservation. They don't understand that without hunters, wildlife conservation would have never started. The buffaloes were not protected by the natives or the government. They were protected by the people that depended on them for food, their hides for warmth. Those were the people that stood up and said, we must protect these animals. We rely on them. We must take care of them. We must make sure that if we want to survive, they want to survive. And that is how conservation began. It began with the hunters and the trappers and the tanners. So believe it or not, the industry of hunting supports about 1 million jobs across the country and is like 52nd in the largest company list. It provides so much to this nation and the world everywhere. I mean, there's not a country that isn't touched by this. The industry supports 1 million jobs, and it's the 3rd largest private sector employer in the U.S. Guys, it's important to our economy. Even if you don't like hunting, it's important to you because it's going to affect you. There are more fur-bearing animals today than 100 years ago due to conservation. This is due to hunters and trappers and tanners wanting to maintain their way of life, protect the animals, and keep balance and harmony in Mother Nature as much as possible. No one that traps or tans or hunts has a bloodlust. They have a love for Mother Nature and where they fit into the Mother Nature cycle. It's very simple to see. So if you go and look at why people believe certain things, you can understand that beliefs are held in many ways. You can understand that backgrounds affect these relationships, proximity, geographical, and spatial awareness. All of these things pull into us. But belief means many different things. So belief can be a fact, or it can be just emotion. Like this, for example, when I search protest pictures, graphic protest pictures, there's the pictures I get. And I think these are more harmful than any animal my husband is showing to say this is the animal and then this is what I can do with fur. But when I search and I switch the words ever so slightly, thinking that it's going to give me a completely different propagation of images, right? It's the same images. So we can see that belief here is subjective. Therefore, graphic, violence, things that may be harmful to view, it's subjective. It doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. So there's this thing called controlled intelligence. They look at it from an artificial intelligence perspective, and it's about the way they manage and guide the behavior of intelligent systems and define its boundaries and achieve a desired outcome, because they look into it and cultivate it. And then AI can like go forward and look at potential risk and self-form itself. But people do this to a certain degree as well. How do they do it? Well, it's this little thing called cognitive control. Now, normally cognitive control is the mental ability to regulate your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, which allows you to make thoughtful decisions and resist impulsive actions. Now, cognitive control would mean that you think rationally, you think logically, you take your emotions out of it, look at things from different parameters, and make sure that before you react, you're being more of a responsible person instead of just a reactive bomb. You're responding politely. Now, because we have so many people act on emotions, we have this collective behavior, and this collective behavior it's characterized by spontaneous and unstructured actions of a group, and it's created by social conditions. And look, structural conduciveness, structural strain, the spread of generalized beliefs, precipitating factors, mobilization for action, and the presence of absence of social control is what kind of lends itself to collective behaviors that are kind of negative. Well, we see these in many ways, but this is a little bit more in depth, and I want you to look. Precipitating factors, mobilization for action, social control. What do all of these things sound like? Sounds like a lot of these platforms that have these very vague community standards or rules that they can twist and turn and flex at their whim, depending on if they believe it to be true. That it's not a belief based on factual evidence or empirical data. It's just a belief based on emotion or subjective thoughts. So when you have a lot of people react in a knee-jerk manner to things that irritate them, it's called like a mass hysteria. And this is just a group of people that experience an unmanageable delusion and anxiety all at the same time. We saw this back in COVID time. We saw this with the fear that went on. Well, we see this also used in a lot of social media outlets for attention, for views, for follows. And we've kind of created this mass hysteria on almost every platform that we have and that we collect to as a society. And guess what? Mass hysteria, hey, it's an illness. And the factors basically are stress, anxiety, and social contagion. Look at our news. Look at how we react to each other. Look at how mankind is bristled and upset, and everyone is seen as a possible enemy rather than a possible friend. I believe it's the same way across all these platforms, so that they can create this mass hysteria, mass psychosis, and control the outcome of the platform. Because when people act in mass hysterical ways, they do this because of lack of information or misinformation, and they have this uncertainty. They don't understand what's going on, but they're going to believe what they can cram in their head the easiest because it's going to comfort them. But if you don't do this correctly and you don't really go through everything that you look at adding to your belief system, correctly, it could just make things worse and exacerbate what you're going through and spread it even further in society. So we've got to be careful. So listen, here are some examples of mass hysteria back in the day. And if you say, oh, this has never happened, look, it's happened more times. But this is just some of the biggest ones. And the Salem witch trials probably sticks out to everyone. People say if that was to occur today, it would never happen. No, well, we just were okay with not letting people receive health treatment because they wouldn't wear a flimsy piece of paper over their face a few years ago. I'm not very sure that many of us are very aware of what we're doing on these social platforms that leads us to stages of hysteria. And these stages are the epileptoid fits, the period of contortions and grand movements, and the passionate attitudes and the final delirium. Now, if you apply that to kind of a social context, we see starter-up issues. We see a lot of things where they're digging for information to support their belief, but maybe not looking at the stuff that contradicts it. But then they get really passionate about this, and nobody starts to look at the facts anymore. They just look at the passion and the emotions, and then we're in final delirium. It's a social contagion. So today they kind of try to call it things so it's not as popular to talk about it, but it's a conversion disorder, dissociative disorder, histrionic personality, and that goes along with narcissism. And it's basically split across the sexes. You know, sometimes women can be more prone to it emotionally because of the estrogen and stuff like that. And I say that as a female. But it still affects society as a whole, even if it may resonate with one gender more. So we got to pay attention to this. So here are a little bit more in these breakdowns. And dissociative disorder is probably the worst one because it's disruptions in memory, identity, emotion, perspective, perception, behavior. It makes people kind of look from a traumatic experience at the world in a reactive way rather than processing it in a healthy manner and moving forward, leaving the trauma behind. We have a bad habit of dragging everything through life with us and then pushing that on everyone else we meet. And I think this happens in social media as well. So listen, look at the bottom of this. Mass hysteria is seen as the main threat from bioweapons. So when we're talking about what happened a few years ago, and this was possibly a bioweapon, what was the worst thing, according to PubMed Central and all these doctors and scientists that looked at it? It wasn't the bioweapon or the biocontagion. It was the mass hysteria that was the main threat. It was the public's perception and emotional immaturity that was the most dangerous. Now remember that. Speakers suggested that biological weapons were not very good at causing death or destruction, but they warned of the dangers of public panic and loss of confidence in authorities. The seminar on biological weapons was held to try to get away from hype and the atmosphere of fear. It seems like we're generating this, or we're being put into placements online that generate this, that further ostracize or bifurcate society into two parties and then further break it down emotionally. It's so important to understand that if you're going to try to treat a psychological threat, you have to do it with sound, sensible information, and you have to be accurate and reassuring. These were things that we did not see given to us over this time, and therefore society has lost its trust. Therefore, everyone is in an active state of fear and distrust and mild panic at all times now, which is generating people to react much more differently to people that do not represent like them. People sometimes reject sound logic and facts for a variety of psychological and social and cultural reasons, but the main reasons is that people and individuals, they have forgotten how to process information objectively. And if it contradicts their own beliefs, they have a difficult time going against their feelings because they are no longer based in sound logic, empirical data, or factual evidence. We have become an emotionally led society, which means we're very, very, very sensitive and easily manipulated. Emotional influence is the worst way to make a decision because it overrides logics. People will divert to emotional influence before they will factual influence because it's more comfortable. It's where they find their comfort. It's like sucking a thumb or finding your whoopee when you're 26 and you still need it. It resonates with them on a personal core belief. It doesn't have to be right. It just has to be emotionally satisfactory. We have to get away from this and make our emotions less important and facts more important. Of course, a cognitive bias is just like a confirmation bias or a belief perseverance or, things like that. But we have to understand that they're all there. We have to understand that we have a bias, that we have a belief mandate in our own brains. That we sometimes have a backfire effect and have a knee-jerk reaction to things we don't like or does not meet our emotional criteria. And it kind of neutralizes our ability to look at the world in a well-rounded way. It breeds distrust and fear. And it makes us go to more comforting resources and sources of information rather than more factual sources of information. You're constantly, afraid of being wrong in today's society. So therefore you just want to mesh. You just want to fit in. Well, that's another issue that makes us not think logically and think emotionally. And it's just a very, very, very forced perspective done with manipulation of psychological factors that can be overridden if you are aware it's occurring, but sadly many people are not aware it's occurring. And they would rather be in a group identity, and they think that it's more important than to be an individual, to be a group, a social group, because they feel that social groups are more benefiting. They're much more of a benefactor than having an emotional, sound perspective as an individual. And we're losing the individual ability to kind of commune with ourselves and intrinsically go and listen to ourselves. We want to hear everyone that sounds like us rather than say, how do I really feel about this? So when we have a lack of exposure or understanding to something, then we further retreat from it. And so therefore we don't seek information. We don't logically train ourselves. We don't apply logic. We don't evaluate information critically. We go emotionally, and therefore we immediately hate something, and then we build the resume why to hate it rather than the resume of why we should look more in depth and understand it more to make sure we're doing right things. And we eventually have a difficulty understanding any complex information. We limit ourselves. And in situations of high stress, guys, your body releases cortisol, and then guess what? You live in your amygdala, puts you in a fight or flight reaction, and you feel under threat, and guess what? That just goes back to more of the hysteria and the psychosis and the fear, and that makes you seek those emotional comforts even more, and it reduces you to brainstem function rather than logical, full brain capacity when looking at issues and information. It's very detrimental. In the context of communication, people tend to raise their voice, push back, stop listening when these chemicals are coursing through your bodies, and you're just kind of like, I can't hear anything else but my heart beating and my blood boiling. So you're more concerned with being right and kind of combative and dominant rather than consuming information, digesting it, and challenging your own beliefs, even when it's good, new information. So I would have everyone that doesn't like what my husband does or comes here to say quippy little nasty remarks to understand. You've got a tendency to be disrespectful to other people and not to listen to their opinion. And you really need to take a deep breath and understand that this is a chemical response that you have generated because you have reduced your inability further to take in information and make a sound decision or understand, grasp a concept. It's okay to be wrong. If you're not growing, what is life about? Sometimes you need to understand something more before you can truly appreciate it or have any knowledge to really truly hate it. So when it comes to cognitive biases and brain biology, this is why facts often don't change minds. We are an emotional society. We are led emotionally. Our social platforms are led emotionally. Even our political groups today are led emotionally. Actions across the world are led emotionally. Reactions to medical procedures are led emotionally. We rarely look at facts anymore. We rarely look at scientific journals. We rarely look at experimentation and long-term research. We are just emotional. So much so that they have places like this that teach courses on how to stop being emotionally stupid and improve your emotional intelligence so that you are not dumbing yourself down because you can't compost and separate emotional intelligence and cognitive intelligence. We want to still be able to learn, and we want to be able to understand our emotions, but not have one override the other, but have a good balance and a good understanding and understand that other people have that as well. The key things that these focus on is the emotional intelligence aspects of self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship management. These are all things that if you look at our society and look at our social media platforms, the only thing they really push is social awareness. There is no self-awareness, no self-management, no relationship management. It is all about being in the herd, being a mass number, and creating mass hysteria to promote your belief, your emotion, and your way of life. And to combat that, they say, hey, you need to have some kindness and giving. You need to have acts of service, community care, support neighbors, community members, help people that are different from you, that are offering different resources that you might not often look at or regard as useful. Strengthen every part of the fabric of the community, not just what you think is necessary, what you believe emotionally is necessary, but help others that you would not necessarily help. It will give you a different perspective and maybe understand someone else's life and their motivations. So is Ko-Fi a place where artists can go and create, or is it just another social media platform that is being policed ambiguously and subjectively so that everyone can be put into categories and limited and further whittled down so that we lose skills, we lose perceptions, and we lose intelligent artists that create art based on cultures and historic practices? Because people are subjective and think things are gross. I think a lot of things are gross, but are they illegal? I just swapped.